Star Walker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. Welcome to episode 118 of Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker. If you're a friend of the show, welcome back. Thank you so much for listening. And if you're a new listener, welcome to Game Master's Journey. Lately, I've been doing a lot of world-building episodes where I'm creating my own homebrew D&D world, Primordia. And last time on episode 117, we talked about handling off-the-wall PC actions on the fly. Today, I'm going to share an idea I've been kicking around for Primordia and get your take on it. I'm no longer going to label these episodes where I talk about world building as world building episodes. Partly because it makes the title of the episode really long. And also from now on, I think I'm going to try to have at least some world building content in every episode. So it would be really redundant to call out certain episodes as world building episodes if I'm going to talk about world building pretty much every episode. And the reason I'm doing that is, going back over recent episodes and especially, season 6 of the show, I've been talking a lot about world building, and it seems to be the topic that engages you the most. I always get the most feedback and comments on world building episodes, to the point that when I do a non-world building episode, it almost feels like nobody listens to it because there's so little discussion of those episodes in comparison to the world building episodes. So I decided, at least for the time being, I should go with what works and go with what people are engaged in as far as you, the listener, and also go with what I'm enjoying doing the most myself as a podcaster and a dungeon master, which right now is the world building. I'm really digging it. So we're going to do more of it. And instead of having to feel like I need to devote a whole episode to it every time, I can just have a portion of every show where we talk about world building. And then, of course, there may be some episodes where that's all that we talk about. This is the part of the show where I acknowledge and thank the patrons who support Star Walker Studios and make this show possible. And especially, I want to thank my Tier 4 patron, Mr. Steve Strickland. Let's hear it for Steve. There's Steve.
Yes!
Steve, you're the man! So you can learn all about becoming a patron by clicking on the Patreon button at the top of the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com. And you get some cool little perks for supporting the show and supporting the studio. And one of the perks that you get is the Patron Cast, which is a podcast I put out every month just for the patrons. And I just released the August episode of the Patron Cast. And Nikki joined me this month, and we talked about Star Trek and other nerdy things. So definitely check that out. And you can find all that good stuff at starwalkerstudios.com. So I thought I would just have a quick kind of off-the-cuff conversation about something that I've been thinking about a lot with my world building of Primordia lately. And that's what I want to do with my, quote, Old Magic of Primordia. So one of the beginning ideas I had for this D&D world when I first started coming up with ideas, and I think you can hear me talk about this way back in the first world building episode. And this was before Primordia. This was when this was my world 1.0 when I was kind of going a different direction than I am now. But one of the kind of foundational ideas I had was I wanted to have something called the Old Magic, or maybe I'd come up with something a little more creative than that. But the idea was that we have magic in the form that we know of it today, which is represented by the various character abilities that PCs get in D&D and the spells and the magic items and even the artifacts I kind of see as having been created within this current paradigm of magic. But I had this idea of there being a very different magic that existed long, long ago in Primordia that is no longer practiced or is no longer known about. And the whole idea behind this was I was not ever going to come up with any kind of system or mechanics for this magic. You would never see feats or spells or magic items or abilities that player characters that would get that would come from this old magic. The whole point of the old magic was it was just for the dungeon master. It existed completely in the realm of DM Fiat to the point that I didn't want to have any rules about it whatsoever. Basically, the old magic does whatever the DM wants it to do. It's kind of like magic in Lord of the Rings, you know. Gandalf can do whatever the plot demands that he can do, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just Deus ex machina in its finest, right? And that's the kind of thing I wanted, because I wanted, for me as a DM, to have something that I could use whenever and however I wanted, where I wouldn't have to worry about game balance or worry about mechanics or how does this work. I don't have to worry about, oh, what happens if a player gets a hold of this spell and I've got some PC wizard that learns a spell and starts casting it. What's that going to do to my game? I didn't want to have to worry about any of that stuff. I just wanted to have this kind of ace up my sleeve that I could pull out when I wanted to, where I could make really cool, interesting, improbable things happen that go beyond what's allowed by the rules of the game and not have to explain them, or rather have a very easy, simple explanation for them, which is, oh, this is the old magic, which you've heard legends of, and no one understands or can manipulate anymore, but it's still out there. So that was kind of the idea. And I've had that idea all along. And you know, again, I'm not planning to come up with mechanics or anything for it. So it's not really anything I need to develop per se. It's just something to keep in the back of my mind that, oh, I always have this trump card I can play if I need to or I want to, if it's dramatically appropriate or a cool idea comes to me. So one aspect of this idea or one way that I could do this that I've been kicking around for quite a while is the idea that maybe the old magic isn't really magic at all. Maybe it's technology. And what I want to talk about today is that idea and kind of what do you think of that idea? Because to be honest, me personally, I go back and forth on it a lot. There are days that I think that the idea is really cool and I get really excited about things I could do with that. And then there are other days where I'm not such a fan of it. And I think, you know, maybe I'm trying to do something with D&D it's not really meant to do. Maybe I'm genre bending too much. You know, maybe I'm going to end up with something that's going to be too much like some other form of science fantasy or whatever that's out there. And I go back and forth. So I would love to hear from you. You know, what do you think of the idea just in general, just, you know, kind of as it is? What do you think of the idea of having this ancient, powerful magic that kind of breaks the rules of the game, that's just in the realm of DM Fiat, that just the DM has access to use really just for flavor? You know, not even necessarily just to fuck with the players, although you definitely could, but just to create flavorful things that happen that are like, oh, that's really cool, and something my character completely doesn't understand and that the players completely don't understand. So what do you think of that just at face value? And then what do you think of the implications and consequences that would have for Primordia, and what are some possible problems that that might cause if that's the way things are. Now, you know, kind of at the root of this idea also is this possibility that long, long ago, millions or even billions of years ago, maybe Primordia was a place very much like Earth with a society very much like ours on it. And again, this isn't a new idea. This isn't an original idea. These kinds of ideas have been around in fantasy since the very beginning. You know, just off the top of my head, some places I've seen this personally is the Deathgate cycle of books by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman, which I really enjoyed those books. And those books took place in a fantasy world that seemed to be our world very, very far in the future. You've also got the Wheel of Time books by Robert Jordan. Again, huge fan of those books. And again, that seems to take place in a world that's very, very far in the future from our world today. And if you've only read a few of those books or you didn't read it very closely, you may be like, what? Really? But there are here and there in the books, there are references to things from our culture and our history viewed as legends in that world that kind of seem to suggest that the world of the Wheel of Time is really Earth super far in the future. And then, of course, we also have the Shannara books by Terry Brooks, I believe. I hope I got that right. Which is, you know, very similar thing. Not quite as far in the future as Deathgate Cycle or Wheel of Time, but we have a world, post-apocalyptic world in the future where it's become kind of the cliched Tolkien-esque fantasy world, but it's due to mutations that have happened to humans and all that kind of stuff. So this isn't a new idea. This isn't an original idea. So I'm not really concerned about its lack of originality. I'm just more worried about how would this work in Primordia? And one of the possible manifestations of this, if I decided to go this way, is I kind of like the idea that the magical force fields that protect the older cities in my world, which at this point in the history of the world are the only cities that are left, these magical force fields that protect them from planar incursions, I love the idea that they're not actually magical at all, that these force fields are actually created with this ancient leftover technology. And that's the reason that they work the way they do. And that's the reason that they are not, kind of seem to transcend the rules of magic and seem to be able to control magic itself. And I had a similar idea with the portals, that maybe the portals are actually based on technology. And of course, people don't know this. They think it's or they think of it as magic. But it's really technology, and my portal stones that are used to kind of grow the portals are actually technological devices that are able to replicate themselves. And then that could explain how and why the portals are able to work in places where magic that affects traveling and teleportation and stuff like that shouldn't be able to work. So I kind of like that idea, and I think that could be a really fun and cool reveal moment for the players when the players discover this, even though their characters probably wouldn't understand it or think of it in those terms, to have this moment where the players out of character realize, oh my God, these things are actually really high technology devices. They're not magical at all. And then start wondering, well, are other magic items really magical, or is it all technology? Are spells and abilities that we're using, are those actually magic, or are we somehow using technology and we don't realize it? And again, I wouldn't want any of this to have any kind of mechanical impact or presence in the game. It'd just be for flavor, and PCs would never learn this technology. It would be completely within the realm of the GM. So if I kind of went with this paradigm, then magic in Primordia could actually not be magic at all, but could be the result of ancient technology, for instance, like nanotechnologies. And again, this isn't a new idea either. For instance, the TV show Revolution was pretty much based on this idea, and spoilers for that show if you haven't seen it. But, the show starts out very mundane. And then as the show progresses, we start to see people who seem to have supernatural abilities. And we later find out that those abilities aren't supernatural at all, but they're actually due to the fact that there's nanotechnology all over the place. And these people are just able to somehow control it. And, from a macroscopic point of view, it looks like they're doing magic, but they're really just manipulating nanites. And these nanites are following their commands and making things happen. So, it's an idea. And again, it's not anything new or original, but it could be something kind of cool and fun to do in a D&D world. I don't know. And again, this wouldn't be something that players could ever manipulate or interact with. It's not like I'm going to have spells and abilities in a game that are really technology that the player characters understand in that way. It would really just be a flavor thing. And again, could be a cool reveal for players when they realize that there's this ancient tech about. But ideally, it wouldn't really have any impact beyond that. So, one of my concerns with this idea is I don't know if I could pull this off with a light enough touch so that it doesn't impact the game in any way that I don't like. And even if I can pull that off, if there'd be enough wow factor left to even make it worth it, right? Because it'd be this fine line of, not making it mechanical, not making it something player characters could get access to, but still having it be relevant and impactful enough that it's actually worth doing it all. In the end, I may be complicating things with no real gain to be had. And I'm not one who believes in complicating things just to complicate things. I don't see that as a good thing. So what do you think? Again, this is all very in the idea realm, very conceptual, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately because it's one of those things that I feel like I kind of need to, if not make a decision, at least know which way I'm leaning, so that as I continue to create things for the world, I can kind of keep that in the back of my mind. Now, ultimately, whether the old magic is truly magic or technology doesn't really matter, because either way, it lies solely in the realm of the DM, and it's not something PCs will be able to use or understand. So it's really just a flavor thing. It doesn't really matter that much. For instance, I'm never going to have alien ships landing on Primordia. Like, I'm never going to go there. Even if I go with the magic is technology thing, I will never go there. I'm not going to break the genre that much. Probably what I would do if I went the ancient tech route is I would probably say that Primordia is somehow protected or quarantined from the rest of the universe, so that you can't just travel there physically in a mundane way. You have to use some kind of crazy magic or super technology to do it. You can't just cruise there in your spaceship. And then that way I don't have to worry about that. So again, luckily this is all behind the GM screen. So I don't have to decide right now. And, for you designing your world, maybe that's a takeaway you can have from this show, is that, these kinds of decisions, you don't have to make up your mind right away. There's no way the players are going to know one way or another. There's no way the characters are going to know one way or another. So I don't have to decide right now. I could even decide now and change my mind in the future until I reveal what the truth is to the players and the characters. It can all be in flux behind the screen, and they're never going to know unless I tell them, right? Part of being a GM is learning how to keep secrets and knowing which things to keep secret and which things not. That could maybe be a topic for an episode. How do you know what to reveal to the players and what not? Because it's definitely a dance, because you don't want to reveal too much, because then you give away your reveals, you give away your cool moments, and they lose all impact. And you can also end up with players who kind of feel like, why bother coming to the game? I already know what's going to happen. But on the other hand, sometimes you need to throw the players a bone because they can't figure something out. So they need to encounter a NPC that can help them, or an ancient text that can help them, or something like that. Or sometimes you just want to tell them about something because it's something cool about your world, and it's something that they're never going to learn in character. And it's not really relevant to the campaign right now, but it's something cool that you want to tell them about. So it can be difficult to decide what to share and what not to share. And I promise you, I've made mistakes on both sides many, many times. There have been times I haven't shared things I should have, and there have been times that I shared things and later wished I had kept them secret. So yeah, that could be a topic for another day if people are interested in a discussion on that. So again, I guess the one takeaway I can give you from all this is, as a DM, as a world builder, never set anything in stone before you have to. Even in your own mind, much rather, telling the players things. I would never tell the players more than you have to. Don't tell them a bunch of shit about about your world that their characters aren't going to know. Because as soon as you tell the players, it becomes a lot harder to change anything. Because then you get into the realm of retconning, and that kills suspension of disbelief, and it just creates confusion because people have a hard time remembering what really happened and what didn't when you go around retconning things. So, one piece of advice is don't tell the players any more than you have to, and don't tell them any more than what their characters would know. Make them play the game, make them learn, make them interact with other NPCs if they want to learn more. And, the other part of that is so that you don't have to define things before you have to define things, even to yourself. So even if you're not telling your players about something you're working on, just remember in your own mind that until you present something to the players, it's not live yet, right? It's like a video game patch that hasn't been made live yet. You can still change it, and no one's ever going to know that you changed it unless you tell them. So, don't let yourself feel trapped or constrained by your own ideas, especially if those ideas are ideas you haven't shared with the players, because you can always change things. And as long as it doesn't lead to things not making sense in your world, or things that happened already in the campaign suddenly not making sense anymore, you're okay. So you just want to think about, okay, if I change this thing, is this going to impact anything that's happening or has happened already in the campaign? And if so, how am I going to address that? But my biggest reason to give you to not set things in stone before you have to when it comes to building your world is you never know when you or your players are going to have a better idea. So, maybe you've got all these notes and you've got all these ideas written down about your world, but if it's something that you haven't revealed to the players yet and somebody at the table comes up with a better idea of how that thing works, change it. Go with the better idea. The players will never know. And if it's an idea that one of the players came up with, then when they discover that that's actually true about the world, that player will kind of feel a little pat on the back like, hey, I figured something out, even though they really didn't figure anything out. You just heard them talking and thought, hey, that's a pretty cool idea. I'm going to run with that. So that's a time-honored game mastering trick. And again, falls into that, not revealing too much to the players. They don't want to know. They don't want to know what's going on behind that screen. They may think they do, but they really don't. Mystery is very fun in RPGs, and it's kind of hard to have any suspense on the player side of the table if there's no mystery. So that's what I'm thinking about the Old Magic. Either way, I want to have it as this kind of trump card I can play, this wild card that can do whatever I want it to do, that I can pull out of my ass in a moment's notice if I need to, whether or not it ends up being just some really powerful form of magic that no one knows anymore, or whether it turns out to actually be technology. I don't know. I'll have to decide. But I would love to hear from you if you have an opinion one way or the other, or just some thoughts of how this would affect Primordia, depending which way I went. I'd love to hear from you. One of my favorite things about this show is when I get feedback from listeners like you. I love pulling feedback into the show as much as I can, and especially the world building stuff. I love hearing from you, your ideas, whether it's about what I talked about and what I'm talking about with Primordia, or whether it's to share ideas about your world. Now, a great way to get a hold of me is to email me at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. If you want to talk about your homebrew world, I strongly encourage you to share it on the Google Plus community for Game Masters Journey. And you can find the link to the community in the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com. And we've had quite a few listeners already share stuff about their worlds on there. And it's super cool to read and see what everyone else is doing. So I strongly encourage you, if you have your own homebrew world, to tell us all about it on the Google Plus community. You can also follow me on Twitter at Lex Starwalker and on Google Plus Lex Starwalker. You can also find me on YouTube, Facebook, all kinds of places. And I've got links to everything in the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com. All right, well, that is going to wrap up episode 118 of Game Master's Journey, trying to keep it short and sweet this week and to the point. Got a lot going on, but I do want to keep this show going, and I don't want to have too many down weeks with no episodes. So put out a quick and dirty episode for you today, but I'm really curious to see what people think about today's topic, and hopefully by the time I make the next episode 119, we have at least a few more people telling us all about their homebrew worlds on the Google Plus community for Game Master's Journey. I can't wait to learn about your world. So I hope that you have a chance to play your favorite RPG this week. I'll be back soon with another episode of Game Master's Journey. Until then, game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music provided by Cloudwalker, Renfield, Stanko, Transboy, and Ish. Please see the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/Game Master's Journey.